You wanted the best and you've got it. My first heavy metal band of all time. It's time to put them in the Metal Dude Hall of Fame. Tonight, Kiss. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to a very special episode of the Metal Dude Abides. We do this thing from time to time where we put someone into the Metal Dude Hall of Fame. The bands that have had the biggest impact in the history of heavy metal and my life. But I would be remiss if I didn't put in the band that had the biggest impact on my life and one of the all-time greats, Kiss. When I was, a wee lad, I found Kiss, and they became my very first heavy metal band. They became my very first band that I loved and really introduced me and led me into 40, 50 now years of great heavy metal music. So they've always had a soft spot in my heart. I realized last year when we lost Ace Frehley, it's time to give them their flowers and put them into the Metal Dude Hall of Fame because they had such an impact. I don't know that I would have found heavy metal or still been listening to heavy metal 50 years ago if it wasn't for this band. So let's pay tribute to them today. One of the things, I'm kind of doing something new with them. I'm going to take a look at their early years because let's face it, it was their early years that got me into music. This will be only the era where they were the original band with the makeup, the whole works. Secondly, I'm going to go through each of those albums and talk and rank every song on each album. So at the end of it, I will give you my top albums and the top 25 songs from that era. Let's start out talking about those first three original albums. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I've been listening to heavy metal for 50 plus years, but the first three Kiss albums even predate me. And that's an important caveat for one simple reason. When I came into the Kiss family, I came in at Kiss Alive. Kiss Alive has 16 songs on it that came off these original three albums. So when I look at these, I never really went back in the day and listened to these albums because the quote-unquote best songs off each album were on the live album that I already owned. And I was having trouble just keeping up with all the material Kiss was putting out with. We'll talk about that in a minute. So when I listen to these songs, sometimes the album version's not quite as good as the live version when we'll talk about this. The other thing to keep in mind when we talk about these songs and albums, in the original days, they were kind of like the Beatles. Everybody had a chance to sing. Everybody had a chance to contribute. So while Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley are the primary lead singers, you also do have Peter Criss, and later on in the catalog, you'll even hear Ace Frehley sing a few songs. So pretty interesting. All right, the very first album, simply known as Kiss. The number one song on this album and the lead track on this album, Strutter. Love this song. This was one song that was sang by Paul Stanley and has one of the most amazing solos of Ace Frehley's career. I really like Ace Frehley's playing, particularly on this debut album. The second best song on there is Deuce. This was also included in Kiss Alive. In fact, Strutter and Deuce came back to back in the live album as well. They really kind of complement one another. Now, Deuce was sang by Gene Simmons. The third best song on this album is a song called Black Diamond, and this was sung by drummer Peter Criss. Now, this is one of those where, how do I do this? Because if I take the live version of this song, it would be the best song on the album. But Black Diamond in the studio has this kind of weird ending where it just kind of feels like, when you used to have your record playing too slow, it just kind of slowly warping down. In the live version, they got explosions and, the drums coming in and out. Much better version. So every once in a while, you see a big discrepancy between the studio version and the live version. I can't think of a better example than our third track here, Black Diamond. My fourth favorite song also made the live album, 100,000 Years, also sang by Paul Stanley. Now, this is one of the rare instances where I kind of prefer the studio version, because in the live version, this is where they put the Peter Criss drum solo in. And like I say, I love drum solos and everything when you're in a concert, but when you've listened to a track 6,000 times, like I have this one, you're like, oh yeah, I got to sit through this drum solo for the 6,000th time. Not quite as good. So of all these songs, maybe one that I kind of go back to the studio version on here, 100,000 Years. Coming in at number 5, Firehouse. Once again, this is a Paul Stanley song, and once again, the live version is so much better. They use their sirens so well in the live version. I love this. They kind of, once again, you'll see this a couple times where the live version is just a tad bit faster, really has a lot more energy to it. Going back to Gene Simmons for a second, number 6, Cold Gin. Now, we talked about the fact that everybody in the band sings. Well, Ace Frehley was very insecure about his voice, didn't want to take the lead mic, but this was a song that Ace Frehley wrote. Coming in at number 7, we've got the first song that didn't make Kiss Alive, Let Me Know. Starts out okay, but has a really cool, heavy ending. Again, Gene Simmons singing on this one. Coming in at number 8, we go back to another song that made the live album, Nothing to Lose. Once again, Gene Simmons. And once again, on the live album, so much better. I don't know, the chorus in this, on the studio version, it just seems flat. Much better live version. And then, the last bit here, there's the Kiss Love theme, which is a little bit of an instrumental. It's okay, kind of a filler. And finally, Kissing Time, which would be my worst song on the album, Gene Simmons. This is one of those songs where they just start shouting out cities because they might tour there one day. So hey, we're gonna sing about every city we know of. Kind of cheesy. Don't really like Love Theme or Kissing Time, but the other 8 songs really great. Now let's move on to their next album. The second Kiss album, Hotter Than Hell. I think it's a step back from their debut album. I think Kiss is the better album of the two, and maybe Hotter Than Hell, track by track, maybe the weakest of the first 3. But it still has some excellent songs on it and is the heaviest, I believe, of the first 3 studio albums. And speaking of heavy, one of the heaviest songs in the entirety of the early Kiss library, Parasite. I love this song. Tremendous bass. This is one of my favorite Gene Simmons songs. Coming in at number 2, Let Me Go, Rock and Roll. Hot take alert. There are 2 big rock and roll anthem songs in the early Kiss catalog, Let Me Go, Rock and Roll, and the much more famous Rock and Roll All Night that they even released as a single down the road. Now, Rock and Roll All Night becomes kind of the anthem most associated with Kiss. But in my opinion, Let Me Go Rock and Roll is a little jazzier, a little fun. And Kiss closes the album with this one, not Rock and Roll All Night. So I think at the time, Kiss might have agreed with me. This is the better of the 2. Kind of funny how things work out. Coming in at number 3, the title track, Hotter Than Hell, also on Kiss Alive. And this is, again, one of those songs that if you listen to the studio version, it kind of drives you crazy. Because on the live album, just a little bit faster, has a little bit more pep and energy than the one here on the studio album. The 4th song, also on Kiss Alive, Watching You, sung by Gene Simmons. But here's where I'm going to go a little bit away from, what Kiss was doing. Because the next 2 songs, I think, would have been excellent additions to the live album, more than one of the other songs on here. In particular, my 5th favorite song on this album is called Goin' Blind by Gene Simmons. I think this would have been a great live song. I also like Strange Ways. This is our Peter Criss track of the album. But instead of Goin' Blind and instead of Strange Ways, Kiss went with the 7th best song on the album, got to choose. That's one that ended up on Kiss Alive. And once again, the live version, sung by Paul Stanley, much faster than the studio version. The studio version kind of drags a little bit. One of the reasons it's ranked as low as it is. Finally, the album ends with our 8th favorite song, Mainline, 9, All the Way, and finally, my least favorite song on the album, Coming Home. Once again, a little history here before we break into the third album, Dressed to Kill. By this point, Kiss was in big, big trouble. They were about bankrupt. They had had some commercial success, but not near enough to keep going. Worse yet, their record label, Casablanca, was also on the verge of going bankrupt. Both were strapped for cash. And so when the album Dressed to Kill comes out, it's kind of a flop for one reason. Studio time being very expensive, Kiss was forced to rush into the studio, put together an album quickly. Casablanca's like, we're on the clock. There's a lot of funny stories about their producer kind of saying, yep, good enough. And Paul Stanley going, we did terrible on that take. We're doing another take. And the producer's like, hey, time is money. I think it's good enough, right? So the other thing you'll notice about this album is like the length of the songs. Most of the tracks on this album are less than 3 minutes. It just seems like this was just kind of hastily thrown together. Now, there are some songs on this album that I like better than on Hotter Than Hell, but I think both Hotter Than Hell and Dressed to Kill are kind of run way behind the original Kiss album. This might be the worst of the three. But let's talk about, again, some of the outstanding tracks they have on here. First and foremost, if you know me, you knew this was going to be the number one track. Come On and Love Me. Paul Stanley singing this one. This has also been remade by Skid Row really well. Love this song. Really loved it. Number 2, a very underrated track on the Kiss discography, Rock Bottom. Has that just beautiful intro, and then it just really kicks in. We talk about the third best song on here, Rock and Roll All Night, one of the most famous anthems in Kiss history. And don't look past our fourth best song, She. Again, a Gene Simmons staple. All 4 of these songs do end up on Kiss Alive, and all are very worthy. The best songs on here that didn't make Kiss Alive, I think number 5 would be Getaway, our Peter Criss song. Now this is interesting once again because Ace Frehley wrote this song, but again, he's not singing, so he gives this one to Peter Criss. He also wrote Rock Bottom, and you know what's funny? You can really tell, especially on Rock Bottom, that was an Ace Frehley written song. Has a lot of his tropes in there, and he gave that one. Usually he gives his songs for Paul Stanley to sing, but I thought it was interesting he gave Getaway to Peter Criss. Love Her All I Can, coming in at number 6. And then it's kind of interesting. The first 3 songs on the album are 7, 8, and 9 for me. Don't really care for them. Room Service, I think this is by far the worst opener on any of the Kiss albums to date. Ladies in Waiting and Two Timer, kind of cringy, didn't really like those at all. And finally, the worst track on the album, Anything for My Baby, very weak track here. Maybe the worst track on these first 3 albums. Didn't care for that one at all. So if you're familiar with the story, Kiss puts out 3 studio albums. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Their record label's on the verge of bankruptcy. Things are looking bleak. And Kiss does something amazing. They double down on themselves, and they put out a double live album, and they go shooting into the stratosphere. When I say the biggest band on the planet, or the biggest band on the earth, when I say that a lot, Kiss legitimately was breaking records. They were an absolutely commercial juggernaut. They were beating like records from the Beatles. They were outselling the Eagles. They were on a run of a lifetime. Now, I came into the live album. That's when I came into the Kiss world. So now you get into the first studio album that I ever owned by Kiss, the fantastic Destroyer. Love this album. And again, the production is better. Now Kiss has thrown off their shackles. They're not, struggling to get, time in the studio. They're a big hit band, and they show it here. They really show off their chops. You can see there's some special effects in the albums. They've got a budget, people, and it starts right off with the title track, or the opening track, Detroit Rock City. Just an amazing album opener. Just an amazing song. It starts off, you can hear someone listening to the news about an accident that's, going to foretell what's about the song. I think it's Gene Simmons reading the news. Pretty good stuff. One of their all-time best songs. The best song on the Destroyer album, Detroit Rock City. Coming in at number 2, though, God of Thunder. This, of course, probably maybe the most famous Gene Simmons song in the entirety of the early Kiss years. This is, of course, the song where he's spitting blood and doing all sorts of things. When people think of Gene, or at least when I think of Gene Simmons, I think God of Thunder. Great song. Shout It Out Loud, another big anthem. We talked about the 2 rock and roll anthems. This is kind of like it, just doesn't have rock and roll in the title, but a really big, heavy anthem. And speaking of anthems, once again, Ace Frehley writes Flaming Youth. I love Flaming Youth. We'll set the world on fire. I was a young metalhead just loving myself some Kiss, and I was like, yeah, we're going to take over the world. Really good stuff. Number 5, kind of an underrated song at the very end of the album, Do You Love Me? Number 6 on here probably is going to be higher for a lot of people. This is probably the best known Kiss song of all time, Beth. And honestly, it probably should be higher. It's just not my favorite song. It's so important to Kiss because this is their big hit. This is when they break into mainstream. I remember back, we're talking about the 70s still, and getting to see Kiss. We didn't have MTV, we didn't have any of this. So to see your bands live was really cool. And so they used to have an award show called the People's Choice Awards, and and Kiss was up for Beth. And so they went live to a show. I think they were in Detroit, and they performed Beth live. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Kiss, and so that's a special moment as well. Again, this is the Peter Criss, probably, again, the best known Peter Criss song for sure. Number 6. Number 7, King of the Nighttime World. Really good, underrated song here. And, oh, by the way, many of these songs are going to be on Kiss Alive too. So, there is that. Coming in at number 8 on this one, Sweet Pain. Pretty good song. Then the 9th track, and maybe my least favorite track on the album officially, Great Expectations. Kind of a strange song. Gene Simmons, love him to death, but sometimes he could get just the oddest darn songs going. Great Expectations is kind of an odd song. And then they had a hidden track called Rock and Roll Party, but it's just a bunch of distortion and bits of Great Expectations and bits of other songs kind of jumbled together. One of those things you did back in the day was you put like hidden tracks on the very end of an album. Don't know why they did it. Has no who would listen to this? I don't know. So it's clearly number 10, but Great Expectations, probably my least favorite track on the album. But this is such a great album, start to finish. Again, you can really see the production has come up. They've got, all sorts of sophistications going on. Really big step in the right direction. The very next album is called Rock and Roll Over. Really another sensational album. Like I said, Kiss is really in their prime years at this point. Love me some Rock and Roll Over. The number 1 song on here, though, maybe a little bit of a controversial take, but I love the album opener, I Want You. It starts off with a really soft little intro by Paul Stanley. Then Ace Frehley just kicks in with a guitar, and they just start jamming. Love this one. My favorite song on the album by far. Number 2, though, is probably the big hit off this album, Calling Dr. Love. This thing was a huge hit for them. Number 3 on this album, Peter Criss. gets up here again with the song Baby Driver. I will say this about Rock and Roll Over. So most of these albums, once again, we talked about it more with Alive, but most of these songs kind of become a best of that then go into Alive 2. And for the most part, if you go through Destroyer, you're going to see God of Thunder and Detroit Rock City. These are all going to get on Alive 2. But Rock and Roll Over is really the first and maybe only album where like the songs that Kiss takes off that album and puts on the live album, me and them differ a little bit. Number 3, for instance, Baby Driver, not on Alive 2. I think it's a sensational, big, hard-driving song. Peter Criss. I think Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, another big song. This is a Gene Simmons special. So the next 2 songs now do make Alive 2. Number 5, Hard Luck Woman. Once again, just my opinions here. I think Hard Luck Woman, which is sung by Peter Criss, is kind of another ballad that I think is better than Beth. I always thought Hard Luck Woman was better. And just as a throwaway here, really I've always thought of all the singers of Kiss, Peter Criss has the best voice of the bunch. I really like his raspy vocals, and I really think he leans into it on Hard Luck Woman. Hard Luck Woman better than Beth? I think so. If you're a big Kiss fan, what do you think about that? Now, Hard Luck Woman gets on Alive 2. So does their 6th best track on this, Making Love. And then coming in at number 7, Ladies Room. Now, Kiss must have thought a lot about this song because it also makes Alive 2. We're down here at the number 7 here. I would have much rather seen Love 'Em, Leave 'Em, or Baby Driver on the live than Ladies Room. Not a huge fan of that song. Number 8, Take Me. Number 9, Mr. Speed. And then once again, Gene Simmons is going to bring up the rear. See You in Your Dreams is probably my least favorite track on the album. Like I said, Gene Simmons has some of the best songs, but it seems like on every album, he also kind of brings up the rear with some song that he's come up with that I didn't really care for. But anyway, Rock and Roll Over, the perfect complement to Destroyer. I think the production of this is really, I don't know how to say it other than it's that really loud, open production, really heavy, kind of raw sounding, real aggressive, whereas Destroyer was kind of subdued a little bit, I think. Again, they were leaning in on effects and stuff. This time they just turned up the volume to 11 and just let them rip. So we talked about the first 3 albums. Now we're going to do the last 3 albums before we go into Alive 2. Of the 3 middle albums, while I love all 3 of them, I think Love Gun is clearly a step behind Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over, but once again, has some great songs, including one of my all-time favorites. I love the title track here, Love Gun. Sensational song. I Stole Your Love, also very good. Coming in at number 3, though, we finally have Ace Frehley singing on a Kiss album. Here it is, Shock Me. This becomes, again, one of his, famous moments. Does a guitar solo in this song with the smoking guitar and all that. So good for Ace Frehley to finally break through. Kind of interesting that shortly after this album, he was so, emboldened by finally breaking through and doing the song. He's like, that wasn't too bad. I think I'll do a solo album. More on that here in a minute. The 4th best song in here, Christine 16. 5th best song, Tomorrow and Tonight. Now, all of that gets on Alive 2. So, again, I'm kind of in agreement with Kiss on what the best songs on here. Coming in at number 6, Got Love for Sale. Number 7, good old Gene Simmons with Plaster Caster. I won't go into what that's all about. Number 8, Almost Human. But then the last 2 songs on here, don't really care for them. Paul Stanley did an old 50s song, Then She Kissed Me. Didn't care for that one. And finally, the last of this, Peter Criss, Hooligan. Didn't care for that one either. Overall, I think this album where it doesn't quite live up to Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over. Those last 4 or 5 songs on there were a little bit weaker. Like this, like Destroyer through and through, great. Rock and Roll Over through and through, great. This is about half good, and then half starts to trail off pretty good. Once you get past Tomorrow and Tonight, it gets a little bit soft. So, but still a great album. We then lead into the second big Alive 2, which is an interesting bit because Alive 2 only has 3 sides of live music and then puts a studio, like a few new songs in there for the fourth side. So kind of interesting there. But those are really the first big 6 where all the members are participating in. And then Kiss goes off in a really wild direction. As I mentioned earlier, Ace Frehley has finally done it. He sang on a song, and it's a good one, Shock Me. And he's written some of the best songs as well, Rock Bottom we mentioned. So now Ace Frehley decides, you know what, I kind of like this. I think I'm going to do a solo album. Well, Kiss isn't really happy about that, and they really don't think he should go off and do something on his own. So, but they can't really stop him from doing it. So what they do is they say, hey, I have an idea. Just so everybody's ego stays in check and everybody gets equal billing, let's all do solo albums. That's right. If you weren't around back in the day, Kiss was about to put out not 1, not 2, but 4 solo albums all on the same day. Again, I'm in like junior high school. I don't have any money. I've just barely got Kiss Alive 2 bought, which a double album was so expensive, right? I'm trying to keep up with the thing, and then they put out 4 of these. I'm not going to go into the solo albums. I will just say this. Very easily, these are easy to rank. Number 1, and it's not even close, Ace Frehley really did have enough material for a solo album. This thing, Rip It Out, Speeding Back to My Baby, Snowblind, New York Groove, Wiped Out, Ozone, Fractured Mirror. I will say that Ace Frehley's solo album was better than Love Gun. It was really, really good. Coming in at number 2 would be Gene Simmons. Again, Gene Simmons had a couple of good songs, a couple of cringy songs, a couple of strange songs. That's the Gene Simmons experiment. At one point, he's doing Jiminy Cricket, When You Wish Upon a Star. You had to be there. But it was all right. It was okay. I really liked Gene Simmons because of the makeup and the fire breathing and the blood. So I probably gave him a pass way too much back in the day. But I would say clearly his was number 2, but nowhere near as good as Ace Frehley's. Paul Stanley, Paul is one of those. He's not going to wow you, but he's not going to be cringy either. It's good. It's not quite as good as Gene Simmons, but it's probably more consistent. And then I don't know what Peter Criss was doing. He was doing all sorts of stuff that wasn't even really rock and roll. He was all over the board. So if you want to do the solo albums, I would recommend go get Ace Frehley's and probably pass on the other 3. But if you are a huge Kiss fan, you want to go through the whole thing, I'd go Frehley, Simmons, Stanley, Criss, and again, in a pretty distinct order for all 4 of those. Now, if that wasn't strange enough, they all get back together and say, yeah, okay, we got that out of our system. Let's put out another album. But, and I think the but here is because sales of the solo albums weren't quite, I think, what Kiss expected. And people were getting a little soured to the amount of albums that people were having to buy. Because not only did they put out a second live album in pretty short order to the first live album, not only did they put out 4 solo albums, they also put out a best of double platinum double album. So they were really milking their popularity by putting out a ton of material and really, taking the fans and shaking the loose change out of their pockets, because that's a lot of albums within a short time frame. So I think sales had kind of dropped, and maybe their popularity had kind of cooled a little bit. So Kiss, always being, maybe the fatal flaw to Kiss is always being a little sensitive to the marketplace, always trying to stay on top, always trying to catch the trend. They say, hey, I got this great idea. Let's change our style up and kind of be a heavy metal with a tinge of disco, We'll change all of our outfits to add a splash of color because at this point, Kiss all their makeup and everything, other than a little bit of green on Peter Criss and of course Ace Frehley's silver face paint. Everything was black and white on this band. So they come out. Ace Frehley's in like this blue getup. Peter Criss has embraced the green. He's in head to toe green with like furry lion type stuff on. Paul Stanley, I think, he's in like a purple outfit, and Gene Simmons looks like they just poured like molten lava on him. Kind of, didn't look nearly as badass as he did with the spikes coming out of the shoulder pads and those big monster boots that he had back in the day. But I digress. The worst part is they kind of get into a little bit of a disco era of Kiss. But having said that, there's still some pretty good songs on here, including the big hit off this album, I Was Made for Loving You. Now, if you don't like your metal tinged in there with some disco, you might not like it, but it was pretty good. Number 2, Ace Frehley once again comes through with a pretty good song, Hard Times. Coming in at 3, Charisma, Gene Simmons on that one. 4, once again, Ace Frehley is really becoming very prolific. He's back with 2000 Man. 5, I think this was a kind of a minor hit off this album. Paul Stanley was Sure Know Something. Peter Criss kicks in with Dirty Livin'. And then the rest of the album's pretty weak. Magic Touch, Save Your Love, and my least favorite track on here, X-Ray Eyes. So let's kind of wrap up the rest of the Kiss collection during their early makeup wearing years. So I'm not going to rank any of the other 3 albums, but I will mention them. The next album Kiss does was an album called Unmasked. And I love Kiss, but that's unlistenable. I bought it in the day. I listened to it. I thought it was terrible. I would have included it because, again, it does technically have all 4 of the original members. They're all still in the makeup. But it's pretty clear that Peter Criss has already said sayonara. The drumming is being done by another person. And so it really doesn't even fit into the canon. They kind of move back a little bit away. That disco has now died, right? So now they're kind of moving back to more of their original sound. But it's a little too late, and it's not very good. And I kind of was starting to get perturbed with Kiss and thinking maybe they're done for. So then they did the soundtrack for the movie The Elder. Now, once again, Kiss has realized disco was a no-go, so now they tried to kind of go back to their old sound, but really put together a stinker of an album. Peter Criss is long lost, gone out the back door. They've replaced him with Eric Carr, and they put out this soundtrack to The Elder, which kind of tries to move them into a progressive rock kind of place in the library, and nobody liked that. This is like, the critics might have liked this one a little bit more, but the fans hated it. This has never been a popular, no matter how many times they try to revive and say, it's actually pretty good, it really isn't. And so at this point, me and Kiss are starting to really get on shaky ground. This is 2 stinkers in a row. Now, their final album with the makeup, Creatures of the Night, actually is one of the best of that original 10 studio albums. Has some real bangers on it. I'm starting to get kind of intrigued. Like, is Kiss making a comeback? Are they starting to do some things? They came to town. They had big tanks on stage. They were really, once again, and the cynical part of me, right? The new wave of British heavy metal has now become a full-fledged force in music. And so Kiss realizes, maybe we should go and get heavier. And so I think Creatures of the Night, probably their most heavy album, at least going back to their original sound that they had done in some time. It was actually pretty good, but then the news, Ace Frehley no longer in the band, and I kind of gave up on Kiss a little bit. Shortly after that, of course, they took off the makeup. They have added Eric Carr, of course, but they also add Vinnie Vincent, and they kind of lean more into, they kind of go back to maybe more, it's not disco by any means, but a much more commercial sound going forward for their Unmasked days. and I kind of went my own way. So I'm not going to talk about the unmasked era of Kiss because I wasn't really listening to it, didn't really like it. I had moved on. But make no mistake, those first, in particular, 7 albums, studio albums, some of the music that is closest to my heart for all time. The original Kiss, the band that got me into music. So as you can see, we were going through ranking all of those songs throughout all those albums. Let's wrap this baby up. All right, the top 25 songs of early era Kiss. Since we've already talked about most of these, I'm just going to go through the list. Coming in at number 25, Watching You. Coming in at number 24, I caved a little bit. I put in Beth. I know I got through saying Hard Luck Woman's a better song, and then I put in Beth, but I do think you have to include Beth when you look at the top 25 songs of a band, because this is their big hit. This is the thing that broke them into mainstream. Number 23, I Stole Your Love. Coming in at number 22, Hard Times. 21, Flaming Youth. All right, top 20 time, Cold Gin. Interestingly enough, this is 3 songs in a row written by Ace Frehley. Didn't mean to do that, but there you go. Coming in at number 19, She. 18, Firehouse. The live version, thank you very much. Coming in at number 17, 100,000 Years. The studio version, thank you very much. Coming in at number 16, Hotter Than Hell. Coming in at 15, a song that's probably higher on a lot of people's list, Calling Dr. Love. Coming in at 14, their most famous anthem, Rock and Roll All Night. Coming in at 13, I Want You. Coming in at number 12, Shout It Out Loud. Coming in at 11, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. All right, the Big 10. Coming in at number 10, the Gene Simmons classic God of Thunder. Coming in at number 9, Rock Bottom. Coming in at number 8, well, let's throw a little disco love in here. I Was Made for Loving You. Number 7, Deuce. Number 6, Parasite, the highest rated Gene Simmons song on the list. Coming in at number 5, Love Gun. Love me some Love Gun. Coming in at number 4, the infamous Detroit Rock City. Coming in at number 3, Black Diamond. Unless you do the live version, then maybe it shoots up all the way to number 1. Coming in at number 2, I Love Me Some Come On and Love Me. At number 1, ironically enough, the very first song that Kiss produced on an album, Strutter. There you go. The top 25 songs in the early Kiss catalog. If you love Kiss and you have a better ranking, go ahead and put your ranking in the description below, the comments below. I'd love to take a trip down memory lane with all my fellow Kiss lovers and see what songs you think are the best. And if you love Kiss and you love this kind of content, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, give it a thumbs up, feed the YouTube algorithm. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.